And this elderly woman, who is 84 years old, could no longer reside in your cabin because your children decided to relocate her to a nursing facility. She desired to offer her modest house to the homeless person who consistently aided her, but the children obstructed this intention. When the homeless individual managed to enter the cabin, what he discovered inside left him astounded. Since her husband's passing, she has been living alone in a cabin in Texas. She had been capable of taking care of herself throughout her entire life, but now it was becoming increasingly challenging. Despite being 84 years old, she still made an effort to maintain the place clean and well-kept. However, her strength and health were not the same as before. When the telephone rang, her eldest son was on the other end, persistently insisting that it was time for her to agree to reside in a nursing home. He mentioned that there would be healthcare professionals to attend to her, activities to engage in, and other individuals to interact with. After numerous arguments, she ultimately conceded that it was acceptable to live in a nursing home. However, she wondered about the fate of her cabin and the small piece of land surrounding it, which she cherished dearly. Her eldest son suggested selling the property and using the money for various purposes, while the youngest son proposed renovating and renting the place to generate a monthly income for the family. She listened attentively to these suggestions, but she was convinced that there was a better solution: donating the cabin to Denver, a homeless individual who had always displayed kindness and whom she had wished to assist one day. Her children strongly disapproved of this idea, as they didn't trust Denver and considered their mother's age as a factor to be taken into account. Little did anyone, even her own family, know that she had something far more valuable planned for the cabin. What they didn't realize was that she had developed a deep bond with Denver over the past 3 years. 3 years ago, as she returned from the market carrying several bags, one of them suddenly tore apart, causing the fruits to roll onto the street. When an elderly woman noticed the incident and began collecting the scattered fruits, Denver approached her and retrieved another bag from a nearby store to help her. From that moment on, he continuously assisted her whenever she went shopping or when the cabin required minor repairs. Despite her insistence, Denver never accepted any money as payment for his services. It wasn't that she lived a luxurious life alone. She was simply profoundly grateful whenever she received a slice of cake accompanied by a cup of coffee, prepared by the skilled hands of the kind lady. Over time, as he himself stated, the measures taken, the two solitary individuals became acquaintances. The elderly lady even extended an invitation for him to dine at her residence, and he demonstrated respect and attentive listening to all the advice given by Mrs. Measures. Gradually, she noticed an alleviation of his depressive symptoms, and a sense of purpose emerged when Denver realized that he could be of help to the lady whenever she needed assistance. Somehow, one day Denver understood that he had to leave and reside in a nursing home. As the years passed, Mrs. Measures mentioned that her children began constantly calling her, almost every day, urging her to abandon the cabin and the land. She lacked the strength to handle this familial pressure. Dependent on her measures, she intended to spend her remaining days in the cabin she built with Harry. However, in life, not all our desires can be fulfilled. The lady calmly accepted this fact and embraced her friend, assuring him that she could always count on him if she required anything. She expressed her gratitude for the opportunity to regain a sense of dignity and confidence while attempting to improve her situation. It didn't even take 2 weeks before Measures relocated to a rest home. The family made all the arrangements without consulting her, as they desired a swift and uncomplicated process, avoiding debates and clashes of ideas. Medici did not notice any change in her, except for the fact that he never saw her in the city again. Occasionally, he visited the cabin to ensure everything was in order. During one of those visits, Denver was fortunate to encounter Mrs. Measures' average children. He approached them, introduced himself, and inquired about her whereabouts. To his surprise, the eldest son rudely responded, stating that she was likely squandering the money he provided her on alcohol or other vices. Nobody had seen her, and he did not expect such discourtesy from the lady's sons, who were as polite as measures. Denver was momentarily stunned and bewildered. He asked again about her location, but not only did the children fail to answer, they also shooed him away, warning him not to return or they would involve the authorities. However, Denver was determined not to let their behavior drive him away from his friend. Since the children did not disclose where Mrs. Measures was, he decided to uncover the truth by himself. Denver made his way to the city's homeless shelter and approached the caretaker, inquiring if there was a list of elderly homes he could consult. In this manner, he discovered that there were only 4 nursing homes, 2 located in the city center, 1 in a more secluded neighborhood, and the 4th situated on the outskirts of the city. Regardless of the distance, Denver was prepared to walk as far as necessary to find her. After freshening up at the shelter, he set out early the next morning. The first 2 nursing homes were close to the shelter, but Mrs. Measures was not in either of them. He continued walking for another 40 minutes until he reached the 3rd residence. Unfortunately, Margaret was not the person he was seeking. He pressed on for another hour until he reached the main road that would lead him to the last nursing home on his list. Denver continued his journey on foot, resorting to hitchhiking along the way. However, despite his efforts, no one stopped to offer him assistance. It was around 3 o'clock when Denver finally spotted a rest house and made his way towards it. Exhausted and thirsty, he felt neither young nor invincible anymore. As he approached the entrance, another man, realizing this was his only chance, hurriedly made his way to the reception area. He inquired about a person named Margaret, feigning confidence as if he had arrived with purpose. He mentioned that he wanted to visit Margaret, who had recently relocated. The receptionist hesitated momentarily but eventually confirmed that Marguerite was indeed there. Encouraged, Denver requested to see her, pretending to be her brother, knowing that simply being a friend wouldn't be enough to gain entry. He was warned that visiting hours were almost over, but he pleaded for a brief moment with her. The staff obliged and led him to her room. As he entered, he was rendered speechless by the sight of his frail and ailing friend. He had never seen her in such a vulnerable state. However, upon closer examination, he noticed a glimmer of joy in her eyes when she spotted him. She mustered a weak but genuine smile. Approaching slowly, he cautiously assessed the situation. The elderly woman seemed in a hurry, gesturing for him to come closer. She whispered something in his ear that sent a shiver down his spine. He couldn't believe the seriousness of what he had just heard. He was patted on the cheek by Margaret and then shook her hand. It was confirmed, it was true, what lay inside was meant for him. After some time, a housekeeper informed them that visiting hours had ended, and Denver had to leave. He didn't know what to make of Margaretha's words, but he felt a tinge of sadness seeing her in such a fragile state. She no longer resembled the independent and determined person he once knew. Little did he know that it would be the last time he would see his dear friend. The following morning, Denver gathered the last of his meager funds and purchased a simple bouquet of flowers. He retraced his steps back to the nursing home, only to discover that his friend had passed away the previous night. The news hit him unexpectedly, and he broke down in tears right there at the reception desk. He inquired if anyone had informed his friend's brother, but it turned out the family had already been notified. In the early hours of the next day, Denver walked away without uttering a word, allowing his tears to wash over his face. He turned towards the cottage that was now his, as per Margaretha's final words. Despite this newfound ownership, he couldn't muster happiness. Inside, he found a spare key, just as Margaret had told him. He faced no obstacles in entering the cottage. Wanting to find solace in the gift he had received, Denver prepared a cup of coffee using the same method Margaret had shown him on previous occasions. Opening the top cupboard in the kitchen, he searched for the coffee powder, but instead, a cardboard box fell to the ground, making a significant noise. Curious, he examined the heavy box and decided to open it, ensuring nothing inside was damaged. To his astonishment, it contained bundles of money, more than he had ever seen, each containing $10,000. In total, there were over 40 bundles, amounting to nearly $500,000. Denver realized this must be Margaretha's life savings. Recalling that Margaret had assured him that the cabin belonged to him, along with everything inside, Denver still hesitated. Eventually, he gathered his resolve, packed his belongings into a worn and aged leather bag, and headed to the harbor. He knew exactly what he needed to do. In the following days, Denver refrained from making any significant changes to the cabin. He merely undertook minor renovations to enhance its appearance, ensuring that the original features crafted by Margaret and her late husband remained intact. He carefully selected personal items left behind by the previous occupant and arranged them throughout the cabin, creating an ambience reminiscent of a museum exhibition. On the living room wall, he hung a beautiful picture of Margaret and placed a lit candle just below it. Denver wanted to make it clear that his actions were not driven by the property Margaret had bequeathed him or the wealth he had stumbled upon. Rather, he wanted to honor and demonstrate the immense value he placed on their friendship. It took only a few days for Meade's two sons to arrive at the cabin and confront Denver, demanding an explanation for his presence there. Denver was honest and explained that he had visited Meade at the nursing home prior to her passing, and she had left the cabin and all its contents to him. The children dismissed his story, considering him to be a homeless individual with possible mental health issues. They couldn't fathom how their mother's property could be handed over so easily to a stranger they didn't even know. Regrettably, they were unaware of their mother's final wishes. Upon hearing this, Meade's younger son lunged at Denver, ready to grab him by the collar. However, his older brother intervened, advising against any physical altercation. He believed that resorting to violence would only lead to legal repercussions. He decided to handle the situation in a more civilized manner and called the police, who promptly arrived in a patrol car with 2 officers. Upon their arrival at the cabin, the police informed Denver that he would need to provide documented proof supporting his version of events. This could be in the form of a digital recording, a will, or a signed letter from Meade. Unfortunately, Denver had nothing to substantiate his claim except for Meade's word. The police informed him that he would have to vacate the premises immediately. The younger son insisted on filing a complaint against Denver, accusing him of trespassing. He was determined to have the intruder removed from the property once and for all. Denver felt deeply hurt by the lack of respect shown by Meade's children towards their mother's final wishes. Holding back his tears, Denver requested a few moments to gather his personal belongings. Notably, Denver noticed that the cabin was tidier and in better condition than when he had arrived. The eldest son had taken the opportunity to clean it up while Denver was occupied. Denver packed his things, including his old blanket, into his worn and faded leather suitcase. Before leaving, he cast a final glance at the sanctuary he had created in honor of his friend, Meade. He surrendered himself to the authorities, knowing that causing further trouble would only worsen his situation. Despite the unfavorable circumstances, Denver had a clear idea of what he needed to do next. Meade's children had not anticipated his next move. In the following weeks, the younger son persistently pressed charges against Denver. When he was released, Denver sought out a referral for legal representation from the shelter where he spent his nights. The caretaker provided him with a recommendation from a law firm, pointing out an advertisement in the city service book. Meade's children wasted no time. They obtained a restraining order against Denver, preventing him from approaching the cabin. The property was put up for sale for $84,000, and they quickly began removing furniture, decorations, and personal items. Selling the property became their top priority. A week passed, and a lawyer named Charles Inter contacted Meade's sons, expressing his interest in purchasing the property as a summer home. The sons were open to the idea but informed Charles that there were other interested buyers. Charles inquired about the highest bid received thus far. The eldest son disclosed that a potential buyer had offered $90,000, which would be paid in 3 separate installments. Charles remained silent on the other end of the line for a moment, contemplating whether it was truly worth entering into a bidding war. When he spoke again, he made an offer of $91,000 in cash, with full payment, on the condition that the negotiation be concluded immediately. The sons of Meade didn't even have to consider the proposal. They readily accepted and marked the conclusion of the deal, agreeing to exchange the property for the money within 7 days. The 2 children celebrated the sale, envisioning a clean slate as they used the term discard for all the trinkets left behind by the previous occupant of the cabin. However, they realized that it wasn't necessary. If their plan was to undo what had been done to the cabin, they were willing to pay an additional $1,000 to restore it to its original condition, preserving its essence as it was, if it pleased their souls. Then the sons of Meade proposed that the deal would be finalized for $92,000, with the condition that nothing would be removed from the place until 7 days after the telephone negotiation. The 2 sons of Meade went to the cabin to complete the sales process. Parked in front of the cabin was a luxurious sedan with 2 occupants in the seats. The driver, a man in his 40s or 50s wearing a suit, stepped out and introduced himself as Attorney Charles Winter. The passenger in the car remained inside, obscured by the dust on the windows. Charles greeted the sons of Meade, and the transaction commenced. The lawyer opened a suitcase, revealing stacks of money. He carefully examined the money and nodded approvingly to the older brother. The older brother then handed an envelope containing documents and the key to the property to George, congratulating him on his new summer home. However, Charles extended his arm, signaling for their attention. He stated, "Don't congratulate me, gentlemen. The true owner of this admirable cabin is none other than this gentleman right here," as he pointed towards the person who had just stepped out of the deluxe sedan. This man, dressed in a suit with a well-groomed beard, neatly trimmed hair, and shiny, impeccable shoes, seemed vaguely familiar to the sons of Meade, though they couldn't quite place him. As he approached them, the middle son realized with astonishment that it was Denver, the homeless man. "This is the gentleman who is purchasing the property. All the money in the suitcase belongs to him," Charles explained. Perplexed and unsure of how to react, the children wondered if they should feel deceived or humiliated. However, the fact remained that the money was present in the suitcase, and it equaled the agreed-upon amount. Reluctantly, the eldest son had no choice but to hand over the key and the envelope to Denver. With a deep sense of anger in his gaze, Denver accepted the envelope from Charles and held on to the key. He remarked, "You will never know the true intentions of your mother. She did everything to keep me away from her and what remained of her, but evidently, she knew her children well. She left me the necessary means to ensure that her wishes are fulfilled." The children, bewildered, failed to comprehend the unfolding events and how the homeless man had come into possession of such a significant sum of money. Little did they know that they were receiving a portion of their own mother's inheritance. Now, Denver could rightfully claim ownership of the cabin and live there while respecting everything that Meade and her husband had built. Before leaving, Denver taunted the children, saying, "See you in court. Use this money to hire a good lawyer because if you dare to oppose me, you will need it." With those words, Denver walked away, leaving the children in a state of shock. He closed the cabin door behind him and relit the candle beneath Meade's photograph. That night, he slept peacefully, feeling restored in his new home. If you enjoyed the story, please leave a like and consider watching this other video as well. Okay, until next time. It will surely give you chills. Take care and see you soon.